All right, so we have today with us Dr. Thomas Langdon, who's the superintendent of Walkerville Public Schools, Brian Seymour, who shared with us yesterday in an amazing presentation. He's the director of instructional technology from Pickerington Local School District and one of our fabulous Edu Jedi, and Dr. Michael Martin, who's a principal from Buckeye Central High School. We're happy to have all three of them with us. I'm making sure they're all unmuted and they can speak up. Yeah, there we go. So Dr. Michael Martin, can you speak up first? I just want to make sure I can hear you.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yay. And I know Brian's unmuted. Brian, can you
Hi,
speak
Leilani.
up?
Thank
Hi.
you for having me for round two here.
Yeah, round two. Let's go. Okay, and then Dr. Langdon, do you want to speak up?
Yes, I can hear me.
Okay, great, great. Okay, good. All right, so just want to make sure everyone's seeing the same screen as I am. Yes, that's true. Okay, good. So we have your photos up. You guys are welcome to share webcam if you want to. If you dressed for it today, it's totally acceptable for you guys to do that. I'm not going to share mine because then it would interfere with yours. But my first question for all of you is really related to where do you think all of this is going? There's been a lot of discussion about we're not going back to normal. And I think there's still a struggle with that ideologically because people don't really know where this is going. So I want you all to comment on that first. What are your thoughts on where's this going? So Dr. Langdon, I'm going to give you the nod first.
Okay, well, I guess everybody would probably have to say they're not totally sure where it's going, but I'm an optimist. I really believe that there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel within 3 to 4 months of being able to at least start being able to say, okay, we might be getting back to some kind of a new normal. That's one of the issues that we deal with right now is that, we've always tell our kids it's okay, it's going to be okay. And a lot of us are taken aback by this so much that it's hard to even feel like comfortable to be even talking to your kids. We want them to have a degree of cautiousness and even a degree of maybe a little bit of fear to make sure that they stay safe, but we also want to be comforting to them. So I really believe in the next maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months, we're going to see a degree of normalcy back. I don't know if it'll ever be normal, but I think we'll be able to see some things happening that will encourage us as a nation, I believe.
Good. That's a real positive viewpoint. Can you tell us a little bit about your district for a minute?
Well, my district in Walkerville, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me preface it by saying that I became a superintendent about 35 years old, and that was around 2000 at Walkerville. It's a small district. Then I went on to Big Rapids Public Schools. It's a little bigger, about 2,000 kids. They're the home of Ferris State University. Some might know about their hockey team. And then I went on to Sturgis Public Schools. It's about 3,500 kids, one of the bigger schools in South West Michigan area and Central Michigan area. So not a lot of huge schools, but now I'm back at Walkerville working part-time and mentoring administration to take the role of superintendent, and also I do some consulting. So the ultimate answer is I've been pretty much every level of schools in Michigan, but right now I'm resting at Walkerville. We're doing some pretty cool things, I think, and it's a nice little way to ease into the full-time retirement from public ed and doing something different. So
yeah, it's awesome. Well, it's good to have you with us today. Brian. Yeah, and okay, so I'm moving on with Brian. Brian, I just threw out the big whopper question. Where do you think all this is going?
So I think there's two big aspects that this has kind of forced us to go into. The first one is Edtech implementation. Obviously, there were lots of schools out there that didn't have devices for kids or wasn't even thinking about home Wi-Fi. And those are things that we've had to think about. So I know here in Ohio, there were, I would say about 30% of the schools were completely one-to-one. And now it's far more once all the Chromebooks come in, I guess. So thinking about that, thinking about home Wi-Fi and what's available and having those discussions with the powers that be to be able to move, connectivity to some more of the rural areas in Ohio And I think the other big thing that this has kind of forced is the role of the teacher and changing what that looks like. Getting away from some more of the traditional old school type methods and looking more towards, you know, going back to the technology. What can technology do that a teacher doesn't need to do now? What are some of those burdens or barriers that that have been removed now because of technology? And then one of the biggest things, and I talked about this yesterday, that is teacher collaboration. So I think what we need to do is we need to say, yeah, you know what, this has been, you know, a different situation than what we've ever gone through, but what are some of the positives that we need to hold on to and continue? And I think those two things, if we can continue to ramp up and continue to use digital tools well, and choose the right tools and get those in the hands of our kids, and then also continue to look at the role of the teacher and how can we modernize some of those responsibilities and roles that our teachers are currently doing to make them more effective and make them more efficient in the classrooms.
Yep. Yep. All of which sounds really great as in a positive tone as you're saying it, but boy, is it hard. This is hard. All right. So Dr. Michael Martin, can you first introduce yourself before you launch into the answering the question, where you are, size of your school, that kind of thing?
Sure. And first of all, I do want to apologize for turning my camera off. I am at Buckeye Central local schools. That's actually my hometown. I graduated from here. It's a small rural school. It's nothing quite like Pickerington. I'll tell you that right now. But I think it's actually, I know it's a great little school. We have a population of about 650 kids. So we're small. And the reason I turned my my camera off is because I have 4 daughters who just walked in. So if that happens again, I apologize. And so let me answer the big whopper question. Where are we going? I have 2 answers for that. One is the 21st century. Finally, we're moving into to using some tools that have been around for a while, but weren't forced upon us like they were until last spring. And I say that in just a little bit because you know, schools can be somewhat slow to move at times. And so while these tools have existed for a number of years, they have not been used to the extent they could have really until last year, until last spring. So, but my real answer to that, the non-humorous one is we're moving forward. We're moving forward, which is awesome. You know, it's forcing schools to utilize, as I just said, some tools that had been at our disposal, but we weren't adept to using as much as we did until last year. And it's going to open our eyes to a lot more devices and tools out there that could help, as Brian had said, can really take away some of the work that teachers are doing right now. The tool can do the work for them, provide them with some data, and then the teachers will be able to use that data to inform their instruction and to be more efficient, more effective with their instructional delivery.
Yeah, really great comment. And what are you seeing them use right now in your own school?
Well, we use obviously we've used a lot of Google Meet, a lot of Zoom, like most other schools, but we have been using some other tools like Flipgrid for feedback and for good communication between students and teachers. We've been using different forms of Google tools where you can assign classroom assignments and collect data from. We've been using those too as well. Edpuzzle has been something that was used more, thank goodness, finally this last spring, but we're still using it now in the fall, which is great. So Edpuzzle has been a really good tool for us. We're a Schoology school, so we've been using a lot of those resources that come from it. And Loss of Love, teachers use Google Classroom and a lot of those tools that come with that too. Common Lit, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but Common Lit's been something that we used for English and NWA map and math. So yeah, we've been using some different tools, thank goodness, a little bit, and a little bit more than in the past. And as I said before, I think it's making us much more effective and efficient with the delivery of instruction.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it sounds to me, a lot of tools. What about actual courseware? have you guys gotten into like courseware, taking over some of the, you know, distribution of the knowledge so that there's a little bit of workload off of your teachers? Have you sort of looked into curriculum courseware?
At Walkerville, first of all, let me say one thing, even though I may sound optimistic about where things are going. That doesn't either, whether we have COVID or we don't have COVID or some new virus, we need technology to be able to reach kids, where they're at with their learning style. You look at Howard Gardner and some other people that talk about the fact that, some students are just, hands-on and really have an affinity towards technology. But at the core of it, we need technology mostly because of the fact that we need to make sure that we get formative assessment as quickly as possible and as orderly as possible for data for each student. We have to find out where they are and take them where they need to go. So if this sped that up a little bit, then that was a huge silver lining. But we also, on the other hand, we understand that students need to have the social piece. I really like the last the speaker talking about, you can't, it's really kind of a mixed bag of both, but technology, whether we have this or not, has to be brought forward even more, I think now. We use Myon, we also, really rest heavily on Edgenuity. We rest heavily on Khan Academy, especially for the high school level, but of course throughout. We've been doing that for a couple of years now, making this change. So what this facilitated at Walkerville was a chance to get in even deeper into what we were already trying to do. And it's one of those things where you learn to swim by being thrown in the deep end, right? You may not like it, but you react to it with the tools you have. And luckily, we have some life preservers available. We've been a one-to-one school for 4 or 5 years. The problem is and I won't get into this because it'll just be probably not our turn to talk about this, it's the whole connectivity piece and that kind of thing. And if they are connected, are there 14 kids in the house running around? Are there dogs and cats? I think right now I have one daughter and it's ideal. We're both educators, my wife and I. Even under the best of circumstances, it is tough. And that's the thing we're dealing with right now. I think we're looking at the basic family as being, sometimes we think of it as like the Brady Bunch or something like that. And our students are not in that kind of maybe the other two representatives here have situations where their students are not challenges as much as mine are, but just to get them engaged and, you look outside and it's all sunny out, kids are running around, and have them engaged for any length of time is very tough. So I think the technology is big. Sorry.
No, hey, that's a fantastic comment. It truly is, and it's something that I wanted to touch on. So I'm kind of glad you built that segue. There's two things that really stood out last year to me. Looking back at that, for us it was March 13th. But looking back at that day, number one is I think for the most part, for the majority of our kids, when we flipped from in school to all remote, for the most part, I think the institution of education did a really good job with that. I think we made that flip pretty quickly overnight, and it wasn't perfect, but I think we had it rolling. I know 2 weeks in, we were no longer talking about how we're going to do it. We were talking about how we're refining what we're doing here at Buckeye Central. So I think that we made that flip and that transition really, really quickly. And for the most part, I think, at least from my perspective in rural America here at Buckeye Central, 70% of our kids were engaged, 80% of our kids were engaged most often. And so I think we made that flip pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. Now, other institutions didn't transition nearly as quick. My wife was in the medical field. It took her 3 weeks until she was up and doing some remote conferences with her patients. It took 3 weeks. Manufacturing, it's October, and I just ordered a stove. I have a 4 to 6 month window before it can get here. They still haven't totally figured it out. But schools, I think, pretty quickly did a good job. However, if I'm being honest, 20 to 30% of our kids weren't engaged every day, as Dr. Langdon just said. They weren't. And so for the first time in contemporary education, at least that I know of, for the first time in contemporary education, children had the opportunity to turn you off or just not turn you on. You know, and 20 to 30% of my kids made that decision. And so now that to me is a red flag. And so for me, I've been focused on that since May. What can we do? How can we design a lesson as to where kids, when they're given that chance for the first time to turn you on, what makes them want to turn you on?
Yeah,
So
and so
Mary,
but the question is, Dr. Martin, was that the same sort of attention attrition you had physically in the physical environment?
You know, and that's a fair question, and that's a fantastic question. And I would say that even though they were in the building every day, they may not have been emotionally checked in all the time. And so there's one thing that I certainly learned, at least in my district, was 20% of the kids walking the building needed a team of 10 adults to get them across the finish line. You know, that they needed a team of 10 adults in the building every day for 6 to 7 hours to get them across the line.
And that's a low percentage. That's a low
Yeah.
percentage compared to a lot of the big inner city districts.
That's probably very true.
Yeah. 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 So, Brian, you want to weigh in there on these comments?
Yeah, so talking about engagement, one of the things I said yesterday was Dave Burgess, who is the author of Teach Like a Pirate. One of his big quotes that stuck with us when he was here in Pickerington a few years ago was, if a student didn't have to go to your classroom, would they show up? And it's the same thing we have now. They don't have to log into the Google Meet or the Zoom, but do they want to? So one of the things that we did was we invested in some more engaging type software, you know, more creative type things where our teachers could allow or gamify some of those sessions. So GimKit has been a huge success. We have Edpuzzle. We bought the premium version of Padlet. You know, just some of those things to allow kids to do more than just listen to an adult talk on here, because we actually surveyed a few of our classrooms and they said, I come in, I sit here for a half an hour, I'm on mute the entire time, and all I do is listen or watch an adult. And that's just not where it's gonna, you know, kids aren't gonna come back to that. So how can we interact with kids? How can we give them the opportunity to do stuff? They've got a device sitting right in front of them. Let's harness that power and be able to utilize some of those things, because engagement has to be there, especially for those kids that are in a virtual learning setting. I've got 2,000 kids in our virtual learning academy, which they're 24/7. They haven't been to school in a school building at all this year. So we've got to be able to give teachers those resources and those skills to be able to engage our kids. And they've got to change their instruction around too. We can't take a traditional school, conditional school like environment and try to shove it into a computer, because it just doesn't work. So we've got to be able to give them the resources, change the mindset, and then give kids engaging opportunities to keep them coming back for more.
I totally agree. And I'm coming back to you now. That was an awesome comment, Brian. But Dr. Langdon, I think, you know, even we as the Learning Council, we struggle with getting adults who attend these seminars we're doing right now to really, really engage, right? Like just make a comment, ask a question, you know? So it is tough. And I think it's really because we've had 200 years of inculcating people into a modality where they're sit and get, right? Which is especially true.
I really believe that. I really believe you're right. But the other piece is that some people, like if you ask me a question, I'll give you about 14,000 answers to it. I think some people are more adept, not adept, I don't want to say that, but more comfortable at putting themselves out there. And whether it's the right answer or wrong answer, they don't have a big a problem. And kids are the same way. I mean, they do not want to take risks in some areas. And one of the areas is looking like they're not very smart. So that's the reason why a lot of kids are discipline issues. They'd rather be looked at as bad kid than a not smart kid. So they don't answer questions, they throw their bands around, and they mess around. So that's why I think it's so important to get the kids where they are and have them be successful. And I love the comment yesterday on this program about the fact that, you know, kids, are they motivated? Why are they motivated one day or the next day, a teacher might ask. And the answer was perfect yesterday. I can't remember who said it, but they said, you know, the kid's motivated every day. Whether they're motivated to learn is one thing, or motivated to impress the person across, you know, from their desk is another thing. Or are they motivated maybe just sleep. So, the motivation is always there to do something. It's kind of like the CTRT, right, with Glasser. And we have to make sure that we reach them through this technology as best we can to see where they are and to have them be successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
totally.
and Leilani, to piggyback on that, I know just in this kind of a setting, in front of me, I've got 3 computer screens here. I've got my phone, I've got my cell phone. In this type of an environment, it's just so much harder to be attentive to one task. People are walking in the door asking questions. My secretary is asking this or that. So thinking about that from a student perspective now, you've got whatever you've got at home, all those extra distractions aren't there. And it's now, how do you truly get kids to focus as well too, on the task in front of them?
And think about a child with ADHD or something, where they have a real attention deficit issue. Then you multiply by 4 or 5. They're looking at the squirrel and tree outside. They're listening to, the argument from the second house over. Those kind of things. We have to really super engage them with the technology if we want to make sure that they learn something.
Yeah, excellent. Dr. Martin, you want to say something?
Yeah, and just to jump on both of those comments, think about this. In 2006, Time Magazine made you the person of the year. If you recall correctly, they went back to YouTube, because YouTube was the big deal back then, and I'll make sure I got this right, but it said, yes, you control the information age. Welcome to your world. And that was in 2006. So we're talking 14 years later. We're talking about a generation of kids who've grown up with YouTube, Vine, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. So when they're sitting in front of the screen with our teachers, they're used to the screen time being like what they do with TikTok and Twitter and Vine. And so not only do we have to compete with ADD stuff, and or the squirrels or what's happening in the background, but if we're going to get with those kids on media, we have to be able to compete with how they're used to consuming that media. Does that make sense? I mean, the TikTok generation on Zoom for 45 minutes. They're just not.
Yeah.
If a teacher records a video of them just here of a talking head, you think a kid is really going to watch that for 20, 25, 30, 40 minutes?
No,
it's just not going to work.
Well, I used to say before
this 15 seconds.
Well, and what I used to say before this happened, I say it even more now, is we have to, and I hate to use this, it's not in a negative way, but my thing is that we have to trick them into learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry if that seems a little straightforward, but what's our passion? Our passion is to have students be ready to reach the world when they're 18 years old, whether they go to college or a trade or go to the military, whatever. And if we think that we can do that by the fact that things are just normal and that kind of thing, I think we're going to be sorely disappointed as educators these next 12, 15, 20 years.
So one of the things that we did a few years ago was we had our drama teachers actually teach some sessions on how to be more dramatic, I guess you could say, in your classrooms, so that it wasn't just talking heads. So
that's awesome.
Think about where can that go, and how can we're not asking our teachers to be professional actors or anything, but let's be a little bit more creative than just this type of a view to your kids back home.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's some of the things that we started talking about too. And I didn't get the drama teacher to do that. That's a fantastic idea, though.
Yes, it is.
But we started looking at, I started studying, as I said, different social media forms out there, the popular people on TikTok, the popular. How do you get a video to go viral? And then take some of those skills, Brian, as you mentioned earlier. It's not just the resource, it's the skill. How do you get some of those skills and then integrate those into your classroom or into your online presence? How do you do that? Because you really do need to figure that out if you want to engage today's kids.
And think about TikTok. We saw that there was a little like the taken away, through President Trump was talking about the fact that we may have to shut it down, but nobody was really too worried about that because kids and young adults and whoever was going to figure a way to get around that and to still get on TikTok, right? So those are the kind of things we have to address. They're not going to fight to be seeing our product if it's not interesting, if it's not something that they see as germane to their world. It's just going to be a failure.
And the other thing along those, those same ideas. You know, we've heard a lot of people saying, oh, I bought this type of video software, I bought that type of video software. Well, I didn't buy any of those because I wanted my teachers to use the free versions because they've got time limits on them. So for example, Screencastify, you can get a free version, but you can only create 5-minute videos. You think a kid's gonna watch a video for longer than 5 minutes?
Right.
No. So if you're creating 45-minute videos of you lecturing, I guarantee you, your kids aren't watching them. So we just went ahead and did the free version. So that way we're chunking it. It's easier to consume. And teachers have to be a little bit more concise and to the point on what it is that they're saying. And I guarantee you, kids are watching 5-minute videos more than they're watching 45-minute videos.
And you know what? And if I can steal two,
I love it.
if I can steal 2 words from both of you guys, you know, it's our teachers have to learn how to create a product. It's no longer just teach a class. They have to create a product that's going to sell to the TikTok generation, or whatever it is, Instagram generation, you know. And so back to your question earlier, Lelania, is there a courseware out there? I don't know one that does what we just talked about.
No, I totally agree, but I totally agree, but there's also a ton of asynchronous time, right? Like you cannot do 8 hours of Zoom or 8 hours of video. You can't. So the ingenuity in the courseware world, we've just seen really level up. And what I'm saying is there's a difference between go read this PDF and engaging, you know, gamified software that goes, okay, great, you just earned 5, you know, new tokens and blah, go to level 3. You know, that's a different baby, right? Than we're talking about in terms of what a lot of schools are postured for asynchronous. They're normally just assigning a bunch of stuff that's flat. It's just flat digital. It's boring.
And I think we positioned ourselves.
I'm not here to endorse any kind of a company, but I'm looking at like an Imagine Learning with their product they're doing. And you know, they were at that point about getting tokens and, you know, getting the whole, you know, you having your own, what is it when you get a cartoon version?
Avatar.
There you go. So I'm pretty old. I've been in this business a long time, but I'll tell you, if you don't go with the changes, you're going to be left behind, and our kids will be left behind. So
yeah, and normally what I also say, and this for all you, and then I'm going to call on Linda Epps to unmute herself because she has some comments to make from Orange, New Jersey. It looks like she's from. So, you know, my comment is that the outside world is discovering this. You know, I made this comment before, like there's been an uptick of about $1 billion in spend by the consuming American public on digital learning things. They know about the good stuff. And so if they send their kid to school and the kid's kind of bored and it's like all PDF land, wow, they're gonna be like, you know, I think I'm just gonna make my own way. Thanks, you know, see ya. You know, so right. Linda, do you want to unmute? It looks like you're not muted on my side, but you're self-muted. You're going to have to hit your little button to unmute yourself. Linda, do you want to weigh in? Because you made a couple comments here. I saw I'd have you pipe up. If you don't pipe up, then I will make your comments for you.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Linda.
And how are you?
Good.
I am the supervisor of technology coordinators in my district, and one of the things that we've been trying to employ with our teachers is this is a perfect time to do project-based instruction. You give the kids the topics, the information, and let them just be creative and explore any way they want to show it, whether it's a book trailer, and the kids know the tools. And I found to be very advantageous for our teachers is that the teachers step back and stop trying to take, and they really don't know the technology. Let the kids become the teacher of the tool. And let them teach you the tool while you use the content. And let them be the curators, because that's what the 21st century skills employs, that creation piece. And that's a lot of times what we're missing. And what Mr. Seymour said about trying to take that brick and mortar and transport it right into the virtual environment, you can't do it. And so the teachers need to have a shift in their mindsets as well. But,
so Linda, we went through that whole thing a couple years ago where our teachers were saying you had to do a PowerPoint presentation. Well, my question was, why do you have to do a PowerPoint presentation? And it got to be the point where teachers said, I know how to do a PowerPoint. I can help kids with it. Well, why not allow them to do multiple things and say, you know what, I don't know how to do a wee video, or I don't know how to do this or that, but still allow them to do it. And once they made that transition of letting go some of that power, all of a sudden kids were creating amazing things. And I remember having conversations with teacher-based teams going, I didn't know my kid could write a song, or I didn't know my kid wanted to write a play, and just the amazing things. And there's so many technology tools out there, but the teachers have to let go of that ability to say, you know what, I don't know how to use that, and that's okay.
You know, and even if the students don't necessarily know how to use it, that's even better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because one thing that we certainly know for sure is you know, you're going to have to know how to learn. You know, and so giving them a task and allowing them to use a tool that you don't know how to use as a teacher and the student doesn't know how to use, allow them the time to learn how to use it. You know, the ability to learn is a huge skill. I know it sounds crazy because we're talking about school, but it is. For most of traditional schooling, you weren't taught how to learn. You were just you know, memorized.
Yeah, I think Linda's going a little bit beyond that. One of the things she's saying is just like let loose and let them. Because we know the 7,000 apps that are out there, you know.
And let them explore it. Tell them the 5 or 6 things that you want required, and just let them go. I mean, when we first went into this, one of our teachers, she had her kids take the topic, and I forget what it was. And she taught them Adobe Sparks, and her kids came up with book trailers that just knock your socks off. They were like, why couldn't we do this during the school year? Why did we have to wait till we got the pandemic environment to do these creative kinds of things?
I love the kids at your school, Linda. Those kids are cool.
You know, the whole thing that what Linda's saying right now is really, I think, imperative. This is my thing. I think keep on saying that it's not going to change and we're not going to, you know, beat COVID and it's going to be like this forever. But even if, let's say we did beat COVID, let's say it doesn't happen again after like 6 months, we still have to do this stuff. We still have to use technology. We have to make sure the kids are engaged through technology to be able to formative assess these kids. We can't do the whole summative, you know, it's good for the summer. You know, to me, it's formative is for every day. Summative is for the summer. And we can't do that anymore. We have to have them use this technology to be able to determine where they are, where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are. So, I mean, this is probably, again, a silver lining, but we have to keep on going. Whether we get through all this and it's totally the same, probably not. But if it is, let's keep going, though.
And I think the best way, I'm sorry, but the best way to help the student is through an authentic assessment, as opposed to a multiple choice, fill in the blank, you know, can you write a constructive response? Do you have a thesis? But having a student do an authentic assessment, create it, it's like that, and do it, it shows, it empowers them, and it shows you all the skills that they have to use to do it. Brings it all together, all content, all that. It's just unbelievable, the things that they produce.
That's right.
Yeah, and I like the direction of this, because where I want to go next with the panel, and thank you so much, Linda, is I want to go to, you know, the mutation of space and time. Because what we're seeing, what we're witnessing now is a shift from the teacher centricity and the time schedule that is age old, you know, you move in Carnegie units, you know, to the next class and da 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 da. So that mutation, you know, is very significant. It's changing the job. It's changing the interaction with the student. It's changing what you do with content, what tools you use, the whole 9 yards. So, you know, that's definitely going in the direction of a giant logistics shift of how you use space and time. And we're seeing it in every little nook and cranny. So I'm going to come back around to all three of you panelists. Where do you see that already happening? Where do you see the mutation significantly starting to, you know, put light, you know, turn the light bulbs on in people's heads? Dr. Langdon, you first.
Wow. I think right now there's still this whole idea that even though we can do this, that, you know, parents still have to go to work. So that infrastructure is not the right word, but handling the whole situation with, and one of the big things right now is that companies have learned maybe at home, you know, working is not that bad. So that kind of takes care of that. But, you know, I think right now people are saying that we have to have something that is, going to be applicable and make sure that we can continue onward when things like this occur. But also we have to, I still believe the kids have to go and be social and learn how to interact to some extent. That's why we're humans, and if we don't do that, we're going to lose a lot of what, does make us human. So that's really the concern, is how you balance those two things. We have to be ready for another shutdown, but if there isn't, we have to use this technology in the best way possible that we hadn't been using for the last, since technology was incorporated in schools. We've been kind of lax in that area, so.
Yeah, and I would contend that that is the job of logistics, to now provide the level of distribution logistics, of the Amazons of the world, UPS, the Ubers of the world, to actually create an efficiency of teaching the direct instruction, so refined that they're not at the center of all of the pieces. They're just doing the instruction. And that is really the challenge I'm laying down for you guys. How do you have humanity interwoven at a perfection of efficiency, and rather than the only distribution mechanism you really have? So that's really the challenge that I think is coming, and it's coming in the tech side to enable that. But it's also coming from an ideological viewpoint for you guys as leaders. You have to, if you start thinking this way, then you're like, yeah, what can I take off my teachers? What can I do that makes them the elevated human intersection point, but not the end all and be all of every little thing?
Right, and I guess the question is, what do we want? What do we want the next generation to look like? I mean, do we want people to be comfortable with each other? Do we want people to be able to interact? And if this all goes away, did we lose some ground with that? I'll let the other two talk about it, but there's a lot of concerns. I mean, special ed, how do we deal with students that need the one-on-one? Those are all things that we're struggling with, but I'll listen now.
Yeah, Brian, you go.
Yeah, I think, talking about time and how school is structured and how we're structuring school now. So we're in a hybrid model. Our kids come 2 days a week and then they're at home the other 3 days. So thinking about when that work is going to happen. Some kids are getting up in the morning. They have to go to a babysitter's, or they have to go to a daycare center, or they have to go somewhere where possibly they can't do their work. So we have kids that are doing work at all hours of the night. I've got some cool reports that allow me to see when kids are logging into different pieces of software, and they're not logging in at 8 o'clock in the morning. We had to have a conversation with our high school teachers that, I'm sorry, a high school kid on a virtual learning day is not going to wake up, at 7 o'clock in the morning and want to come to, math class. So we have to be able to be flexible with that. In the spring, when we were all virtual, we allowed some of our teachers to flex their days. Yes, you have an 8-hour contract per day. But does that contract really have to start at 7 o'clock in the morning like it normally did, because your kids aren't available then? So some teachers we allowed, hey, you'll work 5 hours here, the normal type of day, and then maybe you pick it back up again at 6 o'clock at night if you want. But it's one of those things where we have to meet the kids for where they're at. We have to understand, I think somebody said before about, parents are working. I've got a 3rd grader that goes to a babysitter's. The babysitter doesn't know how to help her with some of this work. So anytime that she doesn't know how to do something, we help her after we get home from work. So flexing that time and realizing that, kids are going to be working at all hours of the night. I've got kids that are up at 2 o'clock in the morning doing work and those types of things, because some of them are also working during the day to help support their family. So allowing that flexibility and allowing the flexibility too of our staff, if they so choose to be able to support those kids moving forward.
Yeah, great comments. Okay, coming over to you, Dr. Martin. What's your comment on this whole discussion point?
Yeah, so you know what? There's two sides to that coin. I agree with many of the things that Brian just said. High school kids are not going to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and work. They're just not. Well, not all of them. A small percentage might. A lot of my students last spring had jobs, and so they would go work. And then they had little sisters and brothers who were in elementary who needed a little more help too. So they took care of that. And then on top of that, they had to do their own schoolwork. So we didn't put any time constraints on when our kids had to be working each day, much like Bickerton did over there as well. I would tell you though, that that's a skill that kids have to learn how to do. The ability to manage your time and manage it effectively and still be successful at the end is a skill that they have to learn how to do. Going into COVID last year, they had no chance to learn that. We had no chance to teach that. So we did have students who would work, and we did have students who would then also help brothers and sisters, but still wouldn't have enough time to do the things they needed to do as well. And so those students struggled. We also had those students who said, you know what, I don't want to turn you on today. So those students struggled. And so if we're going to talk about mutating time and place, I'm not opposed to that. We just need to recognize that's a skill that not all human beings have, not all kids have, and something that we need to teach them as well. And so I'm kind of on both sides of that. Now, I will say this. I think a lot of our kids, maybe it's just because the way education has been done as modality for the last 2 centuries, but a lot of our kids do function better on a structured schedule. You know, and that could be from 200 years of just, this is how we do it. So a lot of them do function better on that schedule. But there are some that obviously can excel. Now, bringing up what Dr. Langdon said, a lot of businesses are finding that working remote's not so bad. My little sister works in Columbus for Zulily. She's a buyer, she's a purchaser, and they've moved her all online forever. You know, and so that's just a job that's now been moved online forever. And so the ability to work online and remotely and at home is a skill that our kids are going to have to learn, because I think COVID-19 is going to push that into the professional world more than it has in the past. So while I think a lot of my students struggled with it, I think it's a skill that they're going to have to learn, because as I just said, a lot of professions will be going that direction.
I know we have, you know, I had to rule right away. My entire staff is working from home. And I've been asking my executive staff, like, why don't we just give up the office? Let's just give up the office. Like, I'm all in, right, as the CEO. But there are people, even in corporate America, and we've sort of figured out who they are, who work for us, that you know, it's kind of like we need to have them physically there. We get more work from them, okay? The same thing is true of these students. And some of the superintendents have said, in the course of all these webinars that we've been doing, like, look, you know, some of the kids that were completely silent in classroom, they never raised their hand. Teachers are always like, I don't even know that kid's engaged, I don't get it. You know, they're suddenly all in online, chatting away during the meetings, you know, like typing stuff in and turning in more homework. They're like all in. And then you have other kids who are now, because they're not in a physical environment, they're completely checked out. This is the problem we had with online learning before. So really what I'm talking about, and I'm coming back to you, Dr. Langdon, great comments, Dr. Martin, is the fact that, you know, we're moving to what I'm calling, like, you know, throwing the ball down the middle. I think that there's a coming need for the entirely flexible, on or off, in or out. It's fully hybrid all the way, all the time, but it's built in such a way that has to be entirely flexible, because for the first time we're experiencing good and bad, and we're on the other side, right? And now we're seeing that, hey, mankind is not all like the same flavor. And our mutation point now is that as an organization, we have to be highly flexible. Okay, so you go, Dr. Langdon.
Well, all true. I guess I don't want to be a downer, but there's some kids out there that have parents that are actually antithetical towards education and actually disruptive to their own child's lives. And that's the part that really scares me about not having students come into school. I think we try to gloss over that. We try to dismiss that, but we all know it's true. And what do we do with those students who are under some great, well, you know, I don't have to go any further.
Yeah,
But
you just said a very big.
Pardon?
You just said a very important truth we all can't forget, and that is that if we're going to give student agency, we have to go as far as like you get to choose. So that when they
Right.
raise their hand like, hey, I want to be on campus all the time, we don't question it.
Well, I
and,
think
and
this
the,
too,
the other
Dr.
piece
Langdon.
is, it just to finish my thought a little bit, is the fact that, there's some parents that are actively,
Mhm.
I mean, it's a point where I don't think we can just let every single student continue to stay home all the time unless we have to. That's the part that is going to be the big challenge here. And I really go out to those students that are, being physically or otherwise abused, and the parents have no concern or even less than no concern for their children.
No, I
Yeah,
totally
you know
agree,
what?
and that's why I'm saying you got to blend it. You got to maybe require
Mhm.
a certain amount of
Mhm.
days. I know Lammersville ISD does. You have to be on campus a couple times a week.
Right.
So true, Dr. Langdon. Okay, Brian.
So yeah, I think it comes back to kind of what I talked about a little bit yesterday with the idea that we're doing the shared creation, shared delivery model. So is there a possibility that teachers could team up? You could have one teacher maybe that teaches all in-school kids, and maybe they only come twice a day or twice a week, excuse me. And then the other teacher teaches the virtual time. We have a lack of, at least in our district right now, we have a levy up for new building because we're growing so fast. So think if you only ever had 50% of your kids in a building at any point in time, we could do with less buildings potentially. So talking about giving kids options of, hey, we've got a 5-day model, we've got a 2-day in-school model, a 3-day virtual, or we've got a fully virtual model. I think we'd have to kind of give them specifics and then allow kids to choose, because like you said, there are a lot of kids that are really succeeding really well in a hybrid and virtual type of a model for a variety of different reasons. I talked to a parent a couple of days ago that their son was being bullied last year, and now things are wonderful because he's not at school that much, and his grades have gone up, his mental health has gone up, all those types of things. And being able to do that and getting back to one of our core tenets of differentiation, now we're getting down to those pieces as well too. Spec ed kids would be able to come more days a week if they want. So allowing those different types of choices, but then we got to talk about how are operations going to be different? How are all of those pieces and parts? And I'm looking at Michael with master scheduling for that. So how can we figure out all those things? It would be incredible to be able to move forward with that. I know a lot of our teachers have enjoyed the hybrid model, but being able to have teachers work together would need to be one of the first things that we would do to be able to make this, really feasible.
Yeah, totally. Great. Yeah, great comments. Over to you now, Dr. Michael Martin. This is interesting, Brian. A lot of the stuff that you said is really interesting, but anyway, I want to make more comments, but I don't want to leave out Dr. Michael Martin.
No, go
Also.
ahead. No. Go ahead. Jump in on that.
No, I think what you're identifying, you're giving some clear indicators, Brian, is that we have a need for flexibility. We need to be both.
Yeah.
We need to be hybrid forever, but hybrid is not maybe a class schedule. It's an affiliation to like what we used to talk about as a house, and then a disaggregation of the normal class and grade schedule that we've had before. But what I'm talking about now is some of the advanced work idealizing the future. And I won't get into all of that now, but I'm in total agreement. Human interaction is essential, and there needs to be this highly flexible thing that is both. And not a lot of places are thinking about that. It's like either we're online and we're remote, or we're in school, and we're not thinking about like how we can be totally flexible and personalizing. Okay, so Dr. Martin.
Yeah. So at the high school level, that seems to be a little bit, more of an easier switch to make. I think about the elementary kids, and again, I'm not down there every day, but I don't know how well they learn on their own at home. And I don't know how well they learn utilizing different technologies at home. I can't answer that, but at the high school level, it's a conversation that we had actually last spring was, do we need to be here 5 days a week? And to be quite frank with you, we don't. Colleges don't go to school 5 days a week. You have a college class for 2 days, 3 days, whatever it may be. And that's quite successful. It's the norm. There is no reason why you couldn't imagine let me take that back. There are some reasons why you couldn't imagine a flexible schedule easily. But there is no reason why you shouldn't attempt to imagine a flexible schedule like that. Now, some of the things that would scare me, going back to what Dr. Lendon talked about, is when you deal with a lot of students, as we have over 20, 30 years, and I'm sure you've experienced this too as well, there's a reason why schools have PBIS. There's a reason why schools have free and reduced lunches. There's a reason why schools have wraparound services, because we have a lot of children, unfortunately, that need all of that. They need to see us, that need to see a caring adult, that need to have a warm meal every day, or as many days as possible. And so those things would have to be figured out in your flex model. Is how would you get all that in there? Not that you can't, you just have to figure out how you would do it. But I think that's where Dr. Landon was going earlier.
Right. Well, it's great that a student doesn't have to come to school to be bullied, but what about the students that are bullied at home?
Yeah.
I guess that's the question. And that could take 5 hours to talk about later, but I think we have to be really put it on the scale, of what's important for kids. So.
Yeah, and I'm in complete agreement with that, because I would, if I was running for office and I was in the legislature right now, one of the things I would be arguing for was that school as a community hub is a life coach, right? It's already so far beyond just giving you math and language knowledge and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a life coach, and it has been for a long time, but it's not built for that, right? Like, wasn't originally designed that way. No. And all I'm doing is questioning the design, because I totally agree with both of you. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. We can't keep everybody all day long, so we're going to have to release you back into the wild. But, thank you, Dr. Langan, so much for joining us. We know your time is really valuable. You too, Brian, super valuable time. And you too, Dr. Martin, it's been a joy having you with us. And Linda, I know you're in the background making great comments. Thank you as well. And everyone else who joined today, thank you all for being here.
Thanks to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. All right, so we want to thank one more time before we end off here today our sponsors, who you can see on the screen right now: ST Math, ClassLink, vitalsource, Hapara, D2L, CommScope, Ruckus, No Story, Mobile Mind, Scholastic, Digital Solutions, Mosaic by ACT, and Stay Mobile. Thank you guys all for being here. Our sponsors have been lovely. They're so amazing. And thank you guys all for being with us today. We'll see you again next time. We have an event, and hopefully it'll be live in region for your state. And again, thanks so much. We're going to end off now. See you next time. Bye, everyone. We're going to bring on now Robin Nunes, who's with VitalSource, and she has a vital message to share with you. And Robin, I see you're on there. How about if I hand you presenter status now? Here you go. Watch your screen. Okay, now you have the control, Robin. Introduce yourself, and you have a few minutes to share. We're excited to hear from you. I know we've known each other for a long time, and I'm excited to have you on board.
Hey, Leilani. Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yep, I see it. It says you're on mute. Quote of 2020. Okay, I'm gonna let you share.
Yeah, so that is what, it's a joke in our family too, that we get on these family calls and we have to tell my aunts and everybody, you're on mute, we can't hear you. So I thought that was funny. Well, thanks everyone for having me here today. Thank you, Leilani. It's great to be with the Learning Council. I really enjoy these meetings and the information that's shared with us. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today real quick is less is more. And I think that, as we've all gone through this pandemic and as we've all learned, even as vendors, where K-12 really is in terms of the use of digital and what is needed and what is not needed. I think one of the biggest learnings that we have found, and what I find when I talk to districts and schools across the nation, is they have all these programs, they have all these things that help deliver digital content, and some of them are very robust. Some of them, you know, have a lot of bells and whistles. There's a lot there. And not only is it a lift for your IT department to put these in there, but it's a lift for your teachers and a lift for the, you know, your learning department having to teach these teachers how to use it. So what we have really honed in on, and we'll continue to focus on this, is ease of use and easy implementation. When I talk about this slide, what I really want to talk about is technical implementation. So here at VitalSource, we deliver courseware and we deliver ebooks from all the major publishers. We have over 1,750 publishers. And we are very easy to implement with via LMS, via Clever, via ClassLink. If you don't have an LMS, we have a program called Explore, which is a great option for your dual credit students. They can just go into one URL, have all their books there. They don't have to go, you know, back and forth from the bookstore. It's also really easy for your teachers. They go into their courses, they go in, you know, where the books will be, which will be in the courses, and it's right there, and they just click on it. And everyone has access to the book, both offline and online. And we are focused on, as I said, ease of use. It's intuitive. We're focused on the end user and teacher experience. So it is with our reader. There are read aloud functions. You can size the font. There are flashcards. There are, you know, glossary terms, chapters, videos. We also have a link in there if there's courseware associated with a book, that they just click on that and they're taken to the courseware that they need. So it's one place where all your students, all your teachers can go, and you don't have all this noise with, you know, different reader platforms for different publishers and different codes and all that sort of stuff. We really make it easy for you. And the other thing that I think that has been a huge theme, it has been for VitalSource for a long time, and we've done studies on this, is, you know, when districts work with VitalSource, when they work with me, we talk about what we can offer to meet your needs, and not only your needs, but your future needs, and what you think, you know, where are you going? Where are you looking to go digitally? And one of the things that we can do is really plan out your year, both in the summer, the fall, and the winter, so that when your students get to school, when your teachers are there and they need to plan before school starts, they need access to the resources, they're there. First day of school, resources are there. And I still right now have so many requests coming in from districts across the nation where students still don't have their ebooks, where students still don't have their digital resources. And really, it's an easy problem to solve, because we can organize and help you organize with the publishers, with your IT districts, with your staff, to have this put in so that everyone's not scrambling, just trying to get the courses on. So again, I'm Robin Nunes. I am the National Account Executive for VitalSource. I would love to talk to you at any time about what we can do, the different solutions we have, and also help you make, you know, life simpler, both for your teachers, for your students, your IT staff, and for the administrators. Thanks, Leilani.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sponsoring this session.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Hale from VitalSource Technologies. We're a learning company founded by educators to ensure that all students get the learning materials they need. What follows is a short video that introduces you to the platform that last year delivered more than 18 million textbooks right to students when and where they need it.